Hello and welcome to Dave Talk. I am your host, Dave Parada. I am an aspiring special education teacher, currently pursuing my master's in teaching and a mild mod special education credential at Brandman University, the satellite campus in Riverside. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about a kind of a video book report of a book I recently had the pleasure of reading. It's by a gentleman named Dennis Littke. He was a principal who had founded several schools in the Atlantic seaboard area, predominantly Rhode Island and New York. And he was writing about his experience from those schools, of founding those schools, about how he was able to turn around the lives of several failing students and make them productive students. The title of the book, again, I'll show you here. I got the tablet version. There you go. Take a look at it. It is called The Big Picture. Dennis Littke wrote this book. It was basically published a few years ago. And I think Mr. Littke has since moved on from those schools. I think he has retired from being a teacher and an administrator and has moved on. But basically, he is presenting to us an idea that was a slogan for Apple computers for quite a while. It's called about thinking differently, or in Apple's case, it was think different. Mr. Littke's case, his argument, or at least his presentation, the way he wrote this book, was the fact that schools these days, the answer in terms of educating our students, in terms of moving them up in the world in terms of math and science, wasn't so much what a lot of districts are doing these days, which is raise taxes and throw more money at the problem. I'm sure, as we noticed recently in places as from Oklahoma to West Virginia to Arizona, and right here in our own backyard of Los Angeles, teachers have walked out of the classrooms and went on strike for the strict process of the fact, not only for higher pay raises or for basic pay because of the fact that for the job they do, they feel they're not earning enough, but at the same time as also to reduce class sizes. I know in some experiences for some schools where I've done some teaching at myself, basically teachers are usually find themselves working by themselves in a classroom of anywhere from 30 to 40 students, and sadly that is that's very difficult to do in light of how the standards are being put up there. But Mr. Littke's whole argument was the fact that not only should we have the smaller class size that we all want, but at the same time, we also should really think about changing the curriculum, basically how these students are taught. A lot of the book, for those of you who read the Big Picture as well, a lot of the book, this gentleman is a follower of John Dewey's philosophy in terms of how students are taught. Mainly, what's been happening nowadays is a lot of times, like say for instance, this book was recommended for those of us who are looking to possibly teach, and I think anywhere between the early teens to maybe the middle school age groups. Basically what's happening nowadays is a lot of times in middle school, for instance, students don't usually stay in one class. They basically find themselves spending anywhere from 40 to 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes in a classroom where basically everyone has the same resources, the same textbooks, the same Chromebooks in certain instances, and then they actually study all the same subjects. They study the same, one person does, say, for instance, studies World War One. Everybody somehow, some way studies World War One, and everyone watches the same resources, reads the same textbooks, does the same assignments, does the same spreadsheets, and so on and so forth. And what's happening is there's students out there, and let's be honest, they do exist, who basically tell themselves that they don't care about history, and the fact of the matter is that because of their indifference about learning about American history, they don't do the assignments, they don't do well on the test, they're bored, they don't care, they don't do their assignments, they sit in class and doodle, or those of us with those of them with the Chromebooks basically sit there and play games on their Chromebooks. And basically, what we're finding is that because they quit caring, they quit trying. When they quit trying, the report cards show it. As the students basically find themselves either falling behind or and being forced to take the same class with all the same texts and worksheets and assessments, etc., that they're finding that because they don't care about the subject, making them repeat the subject with the incentive of you either pass this class or you're not going to get a diploma, is in Mr. Liedtke's eyes is basically counterproductive. The whole idea behind the Met was basically to do things differently. It's not unlike a lot of schools, say public schools, which are territorial, or private schools where you pay for the privilege of going to the school. You have to really kind of almost sell the faculty, the staff, or the people that are making the admission decisions why you should be allowed to, you kind of tell them your story, what happened when you were going to school, why you almost quit, and that's how it's kind of like the way of punching your ticket to the school. Mr. Liedtke's idea of basically allowing students to almost basically create their own curriculum in which they, that's the faculty member or the counselor or, when it's the support staff at the school basically determine what the student's interested in, and in which a teacher is then able to create a curriculum based on their likes. And what they're finding is that when students find subjects or find something that they get a passion for, helping the homeless, maybe something along the lines of environmental causes, something along the lines of maybe public transportation, social services, etc., they then are able to create projects or do projects that that they can work in the school, but also kind of take out into the real world and test it out, and they're graded that way. As Mr. Liedtke writes in later chapters, is that because of the success of how they're doing business at the Met, they've been getting visitors from other parts of the country, other schools, to see what they could do to basically duplicate the success they've been having at the Met. As Mr. Liedtke has, of course, been a gracious host, so apparently he believes they're doing something right. Now, granted, the big picture has been written a few years. I mean, it's not that old, but it has been a few years since this book was published, and up and now when I'm making this report, so it's hard to say whether or not I don't think I'm not hearing of too many schools here in Southern California that are duplicating the process that they're doing at the Met. So who knows? We're not exactly considering how competitive and how difficult budgets are for California. I'll go on the record as a moderate guy, but I'm not exactly sure if educators who are under, I'm sure, immense pressure from superintendents and parents, etc., are exactly going to jump on board. But who knows? And everything is worth a try. One thing we've been studying, not only in this class as well as in terms of assessments, that for a lot of times, we're finding that some students are struggling with assessments because of the fact that not every student does well in terms of multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blanks. I mean, for me, I do well with essay questions, but at the same time, I'm not a big fan of essays too much because of the fact that sometimes you can answer the essay question in one or two sentences, but then the back of your conscience sits there and tells you, did I really write enough? And in some cases, teachers are looking for, a minimum amount of words before you can turn your essay question in. But Mr. Liedtke comes up with a solution in terms of telling students, giving students this opportunity to, instead of doing a simple true false, fill in a Scantron, wait for and hope for the best, give the student a project in terms of a cause that they are passionate about. Have their project kind of go along with what their passion is, and then let them give the presentation, because of the fact that this presentation the liability of this presentation is squarely on the student, instead of giving the responsibility to the teacher to say, don't forget, we're having an examination on Friday, 50 questions, here's your study guide, good luck. One thing about the project, the way Mr. Littke presents it, is the fact that a lot of the staff and the teachers are more there of kind of advisors / facilitators, in terms of how they, instead of kind of having the responsibility of creating the test, hiding the answers, looking for cheating, basically they're kind of there to keep track of how the student is doing, and then kind of arrange a time for the student to make the presentation. So it's a wonderful idea in terms of kind of relaxing the nerves of the test taker, unless of course they're a little bit not comfortable in terms of giving speeches in front of large people. Who knows? But it's basically it's different ideas in terms of, as I said at the beginning of this talk, basically saying, things don't have to be the same way. We can, there's ways to kind of help in terms of the success of students who feel that they're failing at school, kind of give them opportunities to make things better. And I think that's one of the great selling points of the big picture, is the fact that it's not so much a how-to, it's this is what we did, this is how successful we were, and this is how possibly you could replicate or duplicate this process at your own school. Depending if you have the support and if you have the mindset to make this successful. So definitely for me, it was a book that I enjoyed reading. I do have a bone to pick that I think that Mr. Littke did a little bit too much talking, boasting about himself. But hey, when you do something that does well and you're very successful at it, of course you're going to be very boastful about how successful you were. So again, the book, the name of the book is The Big Picture. I'll show you the cover one more time. As you can see, we're doing this kind of, there you go, we're doing this guerrilla style in terms of, no fancy graphics, no death by PowerPoint. Man, I love making PowerPoints, but I'm sure I'd bore you to death. But it's kind of real simple. I have the little background of Dave, kind of like in the TED Talk version here. But again, my name is Dave Perrotta. The book, again, was Dennis Littke's The Big Picture. I can be reached at my Twitter handle here, which is at Mr. Dave Special Ed Teach. Again, took out all the vowels on those. Or you can email me at dperrotta@mail.bramman.edu. It's the same email address that all of you have. I really hope that you enjoyed this TED Talk, or this Dave Talk in my case, in terms of talking to you about the big picture. I know many of you have did choice books as well that might have not been the big picture. I know many of you also did the big picture, so I'm sure you're going to find we're going to all be in agreement about what much of a good read the big picture was, and hopefully we'll take some of what we learned in that book with us into our own classrooms in the future. Okay? Best of luck to you. I hope to collaborate with many of you in the future, and you have a good night. Thank you for watching.